Well, that was real special. Oh my goodness, it's hard to follow up on that. What an honor to be here, Rick Perry. I was a 17-year-old small town kid from Glen Rose, Texas. I did have real big hair, but I had real big dreams too. In 1991. And you, other than my mom, state legislator, HD 58, Texas legislature, who is here, other than my mom, have had more of an impact on my journey. And to have you here to introduce me, and for everyone to, I think, fully understand the incredible hand that God has on all of us and on our journey, and understanding that it's really not any of our stories, it's God's story. But having you in my life, and that day when I walked in your office, you were that young, dashing ag commissioner, still dashing, by the way, a few decades later, but to have you with my state officer team, and we came in to meet you. You were the first real celebrity we had ever met, any of us. And you were a celebrity, still are. But I remember that day like it was yesterday. So I'm just blessed beyond belief and overwhelmed by gratitude and so grateful for you. And one thing I want to say, Governor Perry talked a little bit about the criminal justice reform piece, and I'm really proud of that. But that is one of many, 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 many dozens, if not hundreds, of reasons as to why the founders' vision of the laboratories of democracy in our states and your work as the warriors at the front line matters. And while we talked about criminal justice reform, that's amazing, but I so firmly believe, and Rick Perry, you know this, during those 8 years when Barack Obama was president and you were governor, there were only 2 places in the entire country that were creating jobs. One of those was Barack Obama's Washington, D.C. because of the government. The second was the state of Texas under Governor Rick Perry, who created more jobs than every other state combined. That is an amazing, amazing attribute. And again, it goes to George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, that vision of the states being the drivers of innovation. And this is why Lisa Nelson, the amazing Lisa Nelson, everyone, we have been partners for a really long time. And this is why every single time Lisa calls over the last 20 years, I always show up to this organization, to ALEC, and to what you stand for, and to who you are. This, I believe, is the single most important organization of elected officials and policy leaders in the country. Because what you represent, you are the game changers. You are the reason that we can save this country. So I'll get into that a little bit more, but Rick Perry, what a joy. My amazing mom, who decided at 77 to run for the state legislature, everyone, against a 10-year Republican incumbent, and won by a lot. So what a joy. Our amazing mayor, Maddie Parker, she really is that extraordinary. Other than being a Longhorn, she's really pretty perfect. And I always tell her that, I forget that she went to that school in Austin, especially after Friday night. I'd really like to forget that she went to that school in Austin. Having said that, this is my hometown. This is our hometown. And I believe there is nowhere better in the world than where you are today. And I'm so proud of being from Fort Worth, of hailing from Fort Worth. I think I'm the first cabinet member actually ever in America from Fort Worth. So it's just been really special. Of course, grew up an hour south of here in the tiny town of 1,200 Glen Rose, Texas, where my mom is still, and that's whom she represents. So to all of you game changers, it's just really such an honor and a joy to be here and to represent, really what I'm getting to do today. I did not plan to be the Secretary of Agriculture. I have obviously been alongside President Trump for some time now. How I ended up in the first Trump administration, we don't have time to get into, but it was really pretty remarkable. Ended up there running his domestic policy agenda, had completed the process at the end of year 4 of term 1, mapping out what our term 2 agenda was going to be. I think, Lisa, you were in my office a couple times in the West Wing. You kind of helped us build that, as did others. I believe so sincerely that what Trump 1 represented was the opportunity and, in fact, the proof positive that if you fight every day for the constitutional order, if you fight for God and our scripture every single day, if you put the country first, if you believe in the American people and the American dream, and you roll back the heavy hand of government, that we can, in fact, save this country. If you work together with our partners in the states where the real innovation is happening, you can, in fact, save this country. And when I agreed to go in Trump 1, and it was a very difficult decision for my family, I had at the time a 3rd grader, 5th grader, 6th grader, and 8th grader here in Fort Worth at a great school. And in fact, when the president called a couple times, this was 2017, I declined. I said, I just can't do it. I was running the Texas Public Policy Foundation. Everyone, lean on your state-based conservative think tanks because they can help you change everything for the better. Running TPPF in my 15th year after having worked for Governor Perry. But ultimately, after a lot of prayer and discussion, my family, my mom moved with the kids and I to DC, where we homeschooled, and the rest, as they say, is history. I say all of that because as I left for Washington with my family in early 2017, everyone, the common thought was, and if y'all remember Trump year 1, the wheels, were kind of wobbling. A few of them fell off. People were getting fired by tweets. I mean, it was lots of good things were happening, but it was slightly chaotic. And so I watched that from here in Texas and stood by to help in whatever way I could. And the Texas model that Rick Perry built and Greg Abbott now carries on, that Texas model was the reason that I was recruited to that first White House, that in fact we can put a policy agenda together that is forward-leaning, that is for the people, that rolls the government back, that puts the American dream first. We had proven that here in Texas. And so taking that policy to that first Trump White House and building the team in the first Trump White House and building the agenda. When I went, everyone for the most part said, well, I don't know that it's going to be that useful because, well, first of all, we don't even know how the term's going to go. There'd been a lot of chaos, there at the beginning, but also because Washington is indeed so broken. And you all know this, that the years and years under both Republicans and Democrats of the growth of government, of the weaponization of government, of the increasing of the taxes, you all know the story, had taken the government to a place where many people didn't know that it could be ever deconstructed, that freedom could drive the day again. And I didn't know that either. But what I did know is a businessman from New York City who came from a gold-plated penthouse, and I've been there, it is gold-plated, had been at the top of the building in New York, downtown, Trump Tower, that he came down that escalator and he talked about draining the swamp. And in Texas, we had talked about that too. We didn't use quite the fun language. We said deregulation. And no one ever seemed that excited about it. But I saw a man whom I had never met, a reality TV star, a billionaire, come down that escalator, talk about draining the swamp, actually win an election, touch people that never had participated in the political process before who came to vote for him. And I believed in my heart, and I thought God's hand is on that man, and God's hand is on this country, and God has not given up. And if this is the opportunity to take it back, then I'm going to run full speed toward that fire and do everything I can to help him. So ended up Trump 1, that final year of Trump 1, worked to build out what I believed we didn't have at the beginning of Trump 1, the beginning of Trump 2.0 would need. And that was a full policy agenda, healthcare, education, securing the border, foreign policy, all of the things that so many of you work on every day. That if we put that agenda together, that when Trump 2 started, which for me and all of us, we all assumed would be November 4th of 2020, the day after the election, that really we could build on Trump 1, lowest poverty, highest jobs. I mean, you all know the record of that, but we were just getting started. And so November 3rd comes along. I'm sure we've got friends from Pennsylvania in the room. That night, I'm in the East Wing with the president. We're up by 1 million votes in Pennsylvania that night of the election. And we all know that it began to slowly and then at rapid speed slip away. So in looking at that and understanding that and working to fight for our country and trying to figure out were those 4 years of Donald Trump and our administration from 2017 to 2020, was that all for nothing? We had built this agenda. We had proved the founding fathers' vision correct, that under any circumstance, the fight for freedom is always, always the priority. But at the end of it, had we really just been a moment in time, a pause, as America continued to march toward socialism, toward tyranny, and toward the great destruction of the greatest country in the history of civilization. And little did we know in those dark, dark moments that not only was that not true, that not only would we get a second chance, that not only would we reach new and different voters, as Governor Perry said, that not only would we build a big tent, that not only would we have an agenda for all of the people, not for just certain segments of the people, that for the first time in many, many years, perhaps in our lifetime, we were going to go back to a White House. We were going to go with an agenda. We were going to go with a mandate. When you win every swing state and what many thought was impossible to win the popular vote, that at that moment in time, that God had given this country another chance. And I say all that to underscore that when I got the call about being the Secretary of Agriculture and serving in this president's cabinet, that I will be the first to admit that was not on my bingo card. I tell people a lot, and some of you may have heard this, forgive me, but for 4 years, the first 2021, there weren't many of us going to Mar-a-Lago and Bedminster and sitting with the president. And for me, at the beginning of that year, it was about how do I ensure that his legacy and these ideas live on forever? And then as he began to consider and think about re-entering and not giving up, and he had so much left to do, then our conversations began to pivot. And as they pivoted in about 2022, 2023, I realized that the late night phone calls and the early morning, I had one this morning about 6 a.m., the early morning phone calls, that as he was working through in his mind, if he were to win again, not only what he would work to achieve and to finish what he started, but who the team should be around him to get that done. I think we all know this as leaders, and especially those of you who are elected. You can be the most amazing person in the room, but if you don't have the right team around you, none of it matters. And so for President Trump to be thinking about who that right team was, even back to 2022, 2023, and even into the election year of 2024, I have a big whiteboard in my home office tucked away, and I began to write names down. Every time he'd say, well, what do you think about if we win? What do you think about so-and-so for Secretary of State? Or what are we thinking about so-and-so over at Interior? And I started listing all the names so that every time he called, I'd have the list in front of me and we'd keep talking it through. And so the point of all that is nowhere on the whiteboard was Brooke Rollins. That name was nowhere under any title, under anything. And mainly because I had kids still here in Fort Worth and it just wasn't going to be part of the plan. But so I often say that sometimes President Trump and God have other plans for you than you have for yourself. And so I was announced on November 23rd, 2024 as the 33rd Secretary of Agriculture. I realized, thank you. I realized that my work wasn't done yet either. And I realized that, talk about full circle, Rick Perry, the opportunity to fight for and represent our farmers and our ranchers in rural America. Everything to that point, God had been preparing me for this job. Without a strong rural America and without a strong opportunity and market for our farmers and our ranchers, there is no future United States of America for our children and our grandchildren. And all of those years in working in Texas and building policy organizations and working in the last White House and helping build policy agendas, all of it was in preparation for this moment to help this president and our cabinet to achieve what many thought was impossible just 4, 5, 8, 10 years ago. And that is to return the power to the people. In my final few minutes, let me say this. We have been just about 2 miles from here for almost a year, the great church, our church, Christ Chapel, been studying the book of Exodus. Obviously the second book of the Bible, one that frankly I had not spent that much time in. Spent a lot of time in, the key New Testament, and spent a lot of time in Galatians and Colossians and some of the other Isaiah, some of the other great parts of the book, but I hadn't spent that much time in Exodus. And as we started diving in and studying and praying and really understanding God's word and the moments that he continued to call Moses to be a leader for the people, and how that started with God kind of tapping Moses on the shoulder and saying, Moses, I need you to lead my people to the promised land. And every time God would tap Moses, oh no, God, it's not my time. It's not for me. 2 million people is a lot of people to worry about. Got a family. I got all these things going on. God said, no, it's you. No, God, no, it's not me. Go find somebody else. Then finally, we all know God lit the bush on fire, the burning bush, and said, hello, Moses, would you please pay attention? And Moses said, yes, sir. I will heed your call, and I will meet my moment, and I will do what you have called me to do. This year especially, that word hits me so hard almost every day as I think about not just me, but I think about my fellow cabinet members. For those of you that are paying close attention and watching our 3 and 4 hour cabinet meetings on TV, I hope that you have seen something special. I hope that you have seen perhaps for the first time a cabinet that loves each other, that is family, that works together for the common good, that knows nothing of what's next, only of what is right now in this moment at this time, and that is saving this country. I hope that as all of you work and plan and sweat and have to do all the things you do as state legislators and state policy leaders, as God is tapping you on the shoulder. And there are days, my friends, where I know you feel it too. My goodness, I'd really love to, be at the book club tonight. I'd really love to go have lunch with all my friends. But as God has tapped you on the shoulder, and maybe for some of you lit a proverbial, maybe metaphorical bush on fire, answer my call. Meet your moment. Go fight for your country. Save America. Put freedom and liberty first. Understand that without your work and without your leadership and without your calling, this country will fall, and there goes with it the rest of the world. But with the light always outshining the dark, with all of you leading the way, with your partnership next to us in this great Trump administration, I know, I believe, and I feel it with every fiber of my being that we will save this country, and we will do it because of the people in this room. God bless you. God bless America, and God bless this great organization. Thank you all so much. Thank you.